Hi, everyone. Welcome to my first ever author panel. I'm joined with four amazing young adult fantasy authors, and we're here to talk about world building. Our topic of the day is called Who Run the Worlds? Creating realms readers want to live in. So I'm joined by Aamna Qureshi, author of The Lady or the Lion and the upcoming Man or the Monster. Both are part of the Marghazar Trials. And When the Brown Girl Flees is coming out next year or the year after, Aamna?
Next year, yes.
Next year, perfect. And I'm also joined by Brandie June, author of the Spun duology and upcoming Curse Undone, which comes out in October. And Dana Claire, who is the author of the Blood-Light Trilogy, the Reclaimed Kingdom, and upcoming Hunterland that comes out February 2023. So thank you all so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So, and sorry, I always forget to do this. I'm Jordan H. Bartlett, author of Contest of Queens and upcoming Queen's Catacombs, which comes out next year. So to start, I thought I'd let you all introduce yourselves and then tell us a little bit about the worlds you've created. So Aamna, starting with you.
So hi, everyone. My name is Aamna Qureshi. I'm the author of The Lady or the Lion, which is a Pakistan-inspired fantasy about a princess who has 3 months to exonerate her grandfather, or her country will have war. The world of the story is heavily inspired by my own Pakistani heritage, which I had so much fun drawing from in order to write this book, and the sequel, The Man or the Monster, which is coming out in July. When I'm not writing, you can find me baking or going for walks or watching period dramas. Bridgerton season 2 just came out and I was sneaking episodes during the day. So that's a little bit about me.
Fantastic. Yes, so excited for Bridgerton and for The Man or the Monster. Next, Brandie, a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your worlds.
Sure. I've also just started rewatching the first season of Bridgerton to kind of lengthen the experience. My name is Brandie June. I wrote Spun, and it's upcoming the conclusion to the duology Cursed Undone, which is coming out in October. So the premise is it's a Rumpelstiltskin retelling, except the miller's daughter is a con artist, and Rumpelstiltskin is this mysterious fairy boy. So the world was somewhat similar to the original tale, sort of a late medieval, early Renaissance European-esque world, except there are fairies, and it's somewhat well known there are fairies, but what's known about them is pretty unclear.
And the map is so beautiful. I love that. It's kind of like here be dragons, but here be fairies aspect of it. Actually, yeah, if you want to show us.
I'm so happy that I got a map. And it's so much better than like the stick figure map I initially gave them.
Oh, wow.
And I will say what's really cool is that the sequel has a similar map, except here, where it's like fairy lands that no one knows about, this may or may not get filled in more when that comes out.
Oh, very exciting. And last but not least, Dana, could you introduce yourself and your worlds? Because you've got quite a few under your belt.
Thanks so much. I know. I'll make it short, I promise. My name's Dana Claire. I live bi-coastally, so I'm a little bit of New York. I'm a little bit of LA. And I wrote The Reclaimed Kingdom, which is a retelling of Robin Hood, but Robin Hood is a female badass. So she also has powers where she siphons emotions and is able to use those emotions against her enemies. That's one of them. And then I wrote a sci-fi trilogy, The Connection, The Awakening, and The Reprisal. The Reprisal is the 3rd and final installment, and that'll be out in Thanksgiving weekend of 2022, so this year. And that is about a human girl who finds out that her mother, before she died, put an alien energy source in her body, and that she is the answer to saving all of mankind, as well as another planet called Pharaoh. That's all I'm going to tell you. I don't want to spoil it. And then the third book, which is How I Met You Lovely Ladies, is represented by Camcat Books. It's called Hunterland, and it'll be out in February 7th, 2023. And if you are a fan of Supernatural, you are going to love this. Imagine the Supernatural boys, but in high school, with romance. They fight monsters, and they also fall in love. So those are the three different genres that I wrote.
Oh, exciting. And then I wrote Contest of Queens, first of three in the Frame Chronicles. And my world is, I will seamlessly pull up the map here.
I love a good map.
I love it. So, oh, can you see it all right? I'll put a link as well in our little description there. But it is set in a split level queendom where we have the lower realm and the upper realm, and the people in the lower realm and upper realm, they never really mix because it's separated by a huge cliff, and the lower realm is sunken into the basin. So my main protagonist, Jax, she has to venture up to the upper realm because she realizes that the only way for her to have a voice in this queendom is to compete in the Contest of Queens and hopefully earn the crown hovering just above her head.
I love it. Such a gorgeous cover.
Oh yeah, I love this cover. I'm a little biased. So to get started, and because we're going to be talking about world building, that's not just that physical world that you live in, but also what makes that world unique. So it could be a brand new world where you've got a brand new culture, lots of different values, beliefs. The food, I think, really makes a world tick. Or it could be an existing world like in Hunterland, where we've got the world we know, but with those supernatural elements layered on top. So with all of that out of the way, what elements are you most proud of in your world, Dana? And you can choose which world you want to talk about.
You took those Hunterland words right out of my mouth. So, I'm proud because it's hard to write low fantasy, which means that it's in present day when you're putting in so many elements that are unrealistic. So the magical worlds that we create in high fantasy, they set their own rules, right? So if you are to say that people walk on their hands, it's believable because it's a whole new world. But here I had to take the world that we live in and create elements of where monsters such as vampires and werewolves and ghouls and you name it exist. So I'm most proud of being able to develop that, where even as, and I'm biased too, where I read it back and I was like, I believe in that. I believe that that vampire just killed those people at the coffee shop. That totally happened. So I'm proud of that. I think that it can be challenging to write both genres, but for me, low fantasy, this was my first low fantasy, the other ones were high fantasy, was more difficult. So that's what I'm proud of.
I love that. Yeah, because we have an understanding of what our world is. And so you're kind of tweaking with something that we already know. I love that. All right. How about you, Brandie? What is the thing you're most proud of about your world?
I really loved bringing social issues that we deal with in the real world into the fantasy world in a way that they can be kind of looked at through another lens. And sometimes it's easier to acknowledge them when it's not directly in this world. So some of the themes that I put in, there is sort of a class issue. As I mentioned, my main character, Noor, she's a thief because her family is destitute from a recent war. So there's sort of the class issues. There's also a lot of issues around kind of prejudice of the unknown. So there's a lot of talk and rumors about, what the Fae are. It's generally thought that they're these evil, hideous, horrible creatures, which may or may not be true, but a lot of, what is construed about the other because people don't know about it. So I really liked bringing in some of those themes and concepts into my world so that they could be addressed while still having fantastic magic and fairies.
Yeah, why not both, right? And how about you, Aamna?
So I love world building. I think it's one of those main things that can make a book, especially fantasy, so vivid and immersive. And you can really just, disappear into a story for a few hours or however many days. And the part of my own story that I was most proud of in regards to the world building was all of the Urdu and Islamic terms that I incorporated into the story. And I think I was most proud of that just because I had never read a story like that. I think some books have like sort of generic South Asian terms, like maybe they'll throw in chai or like naan or something like that. But I tried to be really specific in my story and, pull from my own memories and just try to make it as authentic and detailed as possible. And I think a lot of that does come from the language. Even like I used the specific like Urdu words for the familial relations. So, like in English, there's just one word for aunt, but in Urdu, there's like 4 different terms. It could either be khala or puppy or tai or chachi, and each tells you specifically how the aunt is related to the person. So I thought that was really fun, and just other stuff like Urdu terms of endearment. Like I think in one instance I used janda, which means little moon. So I really am proud of those aspects just because I feel like I haven't seen them in a book before.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. And you're right. It brings the vibrancy and just that this is a real world and you're in it. And I love almost when you're a reader and you have to play catch up of, I want to figure out what that means so that I can really relate to this world I've been plunked in. Oh, fantastic. I know for me, the thing I was most proud of that I didn't actually anticipate was because my world is a matriarchy, it's all of the gender roles and gender norms have been flipped. And I think a huge part that I didn't realize I'd have to deal with was how the language we have in our world is very patriarchal, just because that's, how it came about. And so when you think of king and queen, you automatically give the power to the king. When you think of lord and lady, you automatically give the power to the lord. And so all of the different ways that I used either new words or I changed how I used our words to make that switch seem realistic and not just tacked on. I think that's what I'm most proud of about my world of Freya. I will also say that I'm proud of actually naming it. I think that was the last thing to happen before the map went to the publisher. And my map maker, Andrew Martin, he sent me an email once and he was like, you have to do it. Like, this is your day. You're going to have a day or else I'm going to call it Poopland. And I was like, I don't want that to be the name. So that's...
I mean, it's not a gendered name.
That's true.
Sometimes naming things can be so easy, but then when you get stuck, it's just like impossible to find that perfect name, especially for something so big as the kingdom name.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure. So, and so apart from what you're most proud of, what was the more challenging aspect of building your world? And we'll start with you, Aamna.
So I think for me, the challenging aspect of world building was sort of like the technical and logistical aspects. Coinciding with the timeline that the story is set in. So what helped me with that, because in the beginning, I didn't even have like a century or anything. But then I was like, is there plumbing? What's like the architecture like? What are the customs? Like, I think it's difficult to work from, like to make a made up world if you don't have any reference. So then I narrowed down to a century. My books are set in the late 19th century. So then when I was doing research, I was able to look up, like what was typical of this region in that time frame. But then another thing that's really great, I think, about fantasy worlds is that you don't have to be 100% historically accurate. You can sort of play around with it and take what you want and then leave what you don't like, just as long as generally the effect is there.
I love that. Yeah, you get to make the rules as long as it makes sense. And you, Brandie? Most challenging aspect?
I think very similar to what Aamna said is trying to figure out like how much of it should be historically accurate. I did a fair amount of research into like the clothing and the food and trying to figure out how much do I want it to be historically accurate versus how much do I want it to feel like a different world. I don't want it, this isn't early Renaissance England. This is a fantasy world I've created. So I don't want it too close, but at the same time, you want that atmospheric feel to it. And similar to like just the setting, but the world in general, since it was a retelling of a fairy tale, I had to spend a lot of time figuring out how closely to stick to the fairy tale, what elements I wanted to keep to make it feel like a true retelling, but also, where did I want to diverge? Where am I making this my own story versus, what has been written hundreds of years ago?
Oh, I love that. Yeah, you're dealing with a lot of different sources. So you can kind of pick and choose, but then again, like Amna was saying, you have to keep it consistent and make sure you're being true to what you want to portray. And how about you, Dana?
So to build upon what Brandie was saying, I think the Reclaimed Kingdom was the hardest one for me, which was a reverse kind of like your story, Jordan, where the main protagonist, normally a male in all the retellings of Robin Hood, is now a female. And I really wanted to keep the essence of that time era because that's important in all the Robin Hood stories. So, I mean, I went crazy, ladies. Like I looked up when I looked up how to ride a horse exactly the way that you would get as a woman get into it as a man, because she pretends to be a small lad with the band of brothers, which is, you know, the gang she's a part of. So I looked up everything. I mean, I think I mentioned concrete at one point, and then when I went back to my revisal, I was like, wait, when was concrete made and cement made? And cement, in case you guys are wondering, is 1845. Concrete is before Christ. So I'm like, I mean, I looked up everything, the types of stones, everything I could possibly think to look up. And then I actually had an editor from the time period read it and red mark everything that was just not true. And it wasn't too much because I did a ton of research, but I really felt like because Robin Hood is such a well-known story. I mean, think about how many movies we have, right? With like the hottest guy characters too. I'm now showing you my age if I say something. But you know, I wanted really to hold that spirit because I was changing the gender of the main character.
Can I add something too? Just speaking of the research reminded me another thing that was a big challenge was to figure out how to make it feel like it was set in an old time period, but also keep it modern enough and relatable enough that it's easy to read, that it is a fun, it's a fun, exciting YA romp.
Yeah.
And I wanted it to feel like that. You know, I'm not using, old English to write it.
Right.
And so finding like, okay, how do I make it, feel fresh and current, but at the same time, not pull people out because things feel too current, too much of the vernacular of, modern day.
Actually, that's a really good point, because I know I really struggled with how to have an exclamation of excitement, like, oh, cool, oh, wow. Like you want to, again, feel like you're in that era, because mine's kind of set in a like pre-industrial, like just before a steampunk era queendom. But you don't want them to sound lame, and you want it to feel natural. So you don't want to create a whole, or maybe you want to create a whole new word, but little things like even just being able to say, oh, cool, like cool isn't really that era.
You could create a new word, but not to use slang or vernacular that's so present day. Like I actually saw this review that recently, and it was a book in the 1900s, and the woman who wrote it used the term "you're crazy," and one of the reviews was like, "Crazy wasn't around in the 1900s. It would have been you're mad." And I was like, "Look at these readers."
Oh,
I'm checking those.
Yeah. I actually created a whole religion for my world, because that way, there were lots of phrases that could be used as explanations, or like where you might curse in the real world. Here the curses were sort of made up so that, it wasn't, I didn't have to worry about having language that was,
it's still YA.
Too blue, or like explanations that felt too modern because they were basically evolved from this world.
Yes, but I feel like that adds such a depth to the world, because as readers, we can understand what those are placeholders for, while still like experiencing it sort of as the characters would be in the world. So you really feel like you're a part of it.
And I think too, like, yeah, it adds another element, because it adds that depth of, oh, there's a religion here and that has shaped our swear words. Or there's I know I use like derogatory terms for people from the lower realm as my swear words, because it's kind of like, well, they are seen as below everybody. So then you're probably going to have a term for them that isn't so nice, kind of like the mudblood idea, but yeah. And then it gets a YA rating and you're fine.
But it also connects your readers to your world and your characters.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And it also, then you can use it as and we're kind of spiraling here, but you can use it as a method of characterization where you have some characters who will use those terms and some who don't. Right. And then why is that?
And I think that builds, not spiraling too much, because I think, that builds a lot of the world building too, because when I did it, it didn't only influence, what their swearing or exclamations are, but, it influenced, who or what they thought about when they were in danger. It influenced a lot of like ceremonies. There's a, coronation that goes on, and it's like, what would that look like based on this religion?
Definitely. And then Aamna, you had a point?
No.
Oh, perfect. And actually, probably following on from that train of thought, what came first for each of you? Was it your characters and the plot, or the fantasy setting? So we'll start with Brandie.
It's definitely the characters first. I usually come up with characters and then kind of flesh them out. I would say roughly the plot was there immediately, or at least the fact that it was Rumpelstiltskin. So I'd say that was there immediately. It was initially, I started with a short story where I wrote it as though Rumpelstiltskin was the hero of the story. And Spun differs from that a lot. The Rumpelstiltskin character is a much more mysterious gray character in Spun. But at least it got me like thinking about how the tropes could be kind of twisted. And especially with the miller's daughter, who in the original is such a damsel in distress the whole time. I felt like everyone was making decisions for her. Her dad was saying she could spin gold. The king was saying, do this or I'll kill you or something. So I really wanted to just start by giving her a lot of agency. And I thought, if she's the con artist, if she's the one telling people she can spin straw into gold, then at least it's her actions that get her in trouble as opposed to someone else getting her in trouble. So she doesn't always make the best decisions, but I wanted them to be her decisions to make.
And it changes everything. And I just love, we've talked about this in another panel, I think, Brandie, but you gave her a name, like in a story about the importance of names. The fact that she doesn't have a name in the original is ridiculous. So yeah, I love that. And then Aamna, how about you? Did you have what was my question? The characters and plot come first, or the fantasy setting?
So for me, it was also definitely the characters. I think I always have the characters in my head first before I even think of anything else. So for The Lady or the Lion, I had a sort of similar situation to Brandie, where because it's a retelling of the short story The Lady or the Tiger by Frank R. Stockton, I had a sort of general idea of what the plot would be. But I think in the beginning I was following the short story with the world building, where it's set in a sort of vague Western type kingdom. It's not very specific. I think because it's a short story, it's not super elaborate about the world building. So in the beginning, when I was fleshing out the story, I was following the original short stories, sort of vague Western kingdom guidelines for that. But as I was writing, I didn't feel like it was as vivid or immersive as I wanted it to be. So I really started thinking, like, how can I make this world my own, And then that's where actually, I think that summer I was in Pakistan visiting family, and we took this trip to the northern areas, which is just like absolutely beautiful. So I was so inspired, and I was like, I should draw from this inspiration and all of this beauty that I've seen and build a world around this and then craft my story around that, which is what I ended up doing.
Oh, amazing. And I know I loved your descriptions of the food and the feasts and the tea parties that they would have. Like, just, it was a book to make me salivate, because it just was so like your descriptions of the mountains and the scenery. And I loved how the princess was like, you really felt like she was part of the location. But I think for me, the biggest thing was
food. So many times when I'm writing, I'm either snacking on something or drinking tea. So then it's just natural to have my characters be constantly drinking tea as well, because that's what I'm doing as I'm writing.
Life imitates art. Or art imitates life. And how about you, Dana? What came first? Characters and plot? Fantasy setting.
I hate to join the bandwagon. I wish I was a little different, but same for me too. I do the same every time, and I actually kind of take it to the next level because I'm in marketing and I'm used to doing storyboards. So I'm very visual. So I do a list of the characters, and obviously it changes as evolves as I go. But then I actually go online and look at like maybe an actress or an actor that I think might look like them, and I print it out and I post it up. And then I follow a plot guideline. It's called Save the Cat. That's started out for movie, and there's also a book version. And then I plot it out that way. And then after that, I go back through and I really see what I can do with the world building. With Hunterland, very easy and different because it's today's culture. But with some of the other ones, I got to be really creative, especially the sci-fi fiction and obviously the retelling of Robin Hood. So that's kind of the same as what the other ladies said, but I add the world building, especially like the foods and like the colors and stuff like that, after I've really gotten their dialogue down. That is like the main part of me is characters, because when you fall in love with a character, it keeps you up all night long, and you know the sun's rising and you're still in that book.
Definitely.
It's so true. Yeah, I love that. I can't wait to read Hunterland. And so how then, and we've already answered this a little bit, but how do you incorporate real world research into your fantasy setting? So maybe we'll start with Aamna.
So because the world of my story is based on a real place, it's based on Pakistan in sort of the 19th century, which is actually before Pakistan was even created, but you know, that the subcontinent. So I love reading about history. So for me, a lot of research was just doing a lot of reading. And then, you know, when you like read an article and then it links you to another article and then it links you to another. So I was just doing a lot of that. And I feel like I didn't even end up using a lot of it. It was just really interesting to see what was inspiring me and little details that I ended up using or sort of manipulated for the purposes of my story. And then a lot of the stuff that I was like, okay, this is maybe stuff that I want to leave out. So it was just a lot of reading.
Yeah, I don't know how people wrote books before the internet, because as Dana, you were saying, you could just Google, when was concrete discovered? And I know for me, it was a lot of like writing utensils, you know, when was the pencil discovered? When were pens discovered? Because you want them to be able to write a note or a letter, but how do they do it if, you know, the pen didn't come out for another 100 years?
Hunterland was so much easier for me to write than all of that. I don't know if I can go back and do another like 1800. I mean, I did so much research. I was like, I need to go back to high school and redo my history classes.
All righty. So next question. Does writing in your world come naturally, or do you have tricks for immersing yourself before you start to write? And I'll direct this one to Dana.
Yeah. So I love binge watching television shows. So if I love Brandie started laughing. It's true. And we were just talking about television shows. So The Last Kingdom, I don't know if you guys have watched
I
this.
heard of it. I didn't watch it.
Oh my God. So like that, I've been binge watching. I just finished it because the last season happens for the Reclaimed Kingdom. I watched, what was the new show or the movie with, oh my God, I can't believe I'm blanking. War of the Worlds. Do you remember that? The new Netflix movie, War of the Worlds, with he's so cute. What is his name? Anyway, I did that for the sci-fi book, that third installment I'm reading now. So I will find like a show either in that time period or even have characters. Teen Wolf, not a great show, but kind of reminded me of, I hope no one who's in that show is watching, but it kind of reminded me of the dynamics in Hunterland. I binge watched all of it. to the point where my husband thinks that like I have a television problem. But it was great because I took notes and things that I thought were really important with character development, world building, and things that I also thought were, you know, not relevant, that they added or didn't need to be there, to remind myself as I was writing, like this, it doesn't add to your characters, it doesn't add to your storyline or your plot. But to me, that's really helpful. And if I'm stuck, I just go to something on television or even a book, but I try to stay away from the book so I'm not picking up other people's writing. And I stick to the, you know, being a sponge and absorbing what I can in the storyline of a movie, because I'm clearly not writing anything down that they're saying. I'm just writing notes. So I love that. It gets me out of any type of writing slump. It also gets me into the world or the time era that I'm starting to build, or even just like sci-fi, watching some sci-fi things and seeing the creative ways that they decide to do things. So that's what I do. And I enjoy it along the way. So it's great.
I love that. Netflix binge watching as writer research. I'm going to have to use that.
And you can write off your Netflix subscription, ladies.
Yes, very true.
There you go. Good to know. Yeah. I know for me, when I was writing the first draft of the sequel, I would do it at 6 a.m. in the morning on my couch. And my couch is right underneath the big map I had printed of the world. So that was always nice to kind of check up and be like, oh, yes, that's where they are. That's where I am right now. Plus,
did you have Poopy Land on the big map?
No, that was the Freya. All right, Aamna, how do you keep track of your world building?
So for me, and this is sort of the technique I use for every aspect of my writing, I do read-throughs that focus on specific aspects. So I'll have a read-through that focuses on, let's say, like the romance plotline or the political plotline, or a read-through that focuses on the character development of a certain character. So I do have one read-through that's dedicated solely to world building. So during that read-through, basically, as I'm reading every scene, I'm just paying attention to the world building and, you know, certain scenes that are lacking. If, you know, maybe there's too much dialogue or too much like action sentences, then I'll go back in and add those details to help set up the scene more, sort of show like the background of what's going on, you know, behind that dialogue, or where the characters are exactly and how those things interact with the dialogue and play with the different things that are going on in the story at that moment. So I love, you know, sort of doing the classic thing of like having the weather reflect sort of the mood. So I always like love writing very dramatic, like rain scenes. So yeah, so I have a specific read through for world building, which helps me keep track of it.
Oh, that's a really good idea. Do you keep track of things like time of year, season, even weather patterns specifically, or does it come as you're writing?
So weather patterns, I don't keep track of. I think that has to do with the specific scene that it's in. But I do have a read through for like timeline where it'll be like, so like in The Lady or the Lion, it begins in the beginning of summer, but by the end of the novel, it's sort of the end of summer. So I think during the like climax of the story is when it's like super, super hot. And then towards the end of the story is when it's starting to get a little colder. So I was like mindful of that sort of rise and fall as well during the read through.
Fantastic. Yeah, I know I had a moment where I was like, I don't even know what season I'm in. I have to go back and fix my seasons. And so, Brandie, in every world, there are locals and there are tourists. And so if a tourist were to show up in your world, what is a local tip, trick, or piece of advice that you would want to give them if they're a nice tourist?
If they're a nice tourist, well, definitely the spring festival, the spring fair is the place to be. And that actually draws in lots of tourists from all over the country. So definitely, you know, check that out, but also be aware that it's big crowds. So, you know, watch out for pickpockets, and probably, you know, carry some iron with you to protect from any of the dangerous fae.
I love that.
Just classically, just, you know, naturally have some iron on me.
You know, like a little piece in your pocket, maybe an iron horseshoe over your door, you know. Just we don't know what they're like. So, you know, it's better to be safe.
Exactly. Yeah. There be fairies.
Mm-hmm.
And where can one find each of you lovely ladies online for upcoming events, upcoming information, or where to find your books? And I'll start with Brandie, sorry.
So you can follow me on pretty much all social channels. My site is Brandie June, BrandieJune.com, and I have all the stuff, all the links for my books, and any of the events that I have are listed there. And I'm excited that I'm starting to do in-person events.
Fantastic. And Aamna?
You can find me at my website, which also has links for all of my books and my social media accounts. And my website is just my name, aamnaqureshi.com. I'm also on Instagram. I think my handle is Aamna_Qureshi. And I'm also active on Twitter, which is Aamna Qureshi _.
Don't get those mixed up. And Dana?
You can find me at danaclairebooks.com. I have all of my events. I think I'm at 7 this year, thanks to Brandie. She booked me out pretty well. And Brandie and I are actually, not this weekend, but next weekend, going to be at WonderCon in Anaheim.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's.
And what are the dates for that, Dana?
The 1st and
the 2nd and 3rd. First, 2nd, and 3rd of April.
Yeah, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And then my website, I said that right, is danaclairebooks.com. I'm very active on Instagram at author Dana Claire, and I still can't figure out Twitter, so that's probably not going to happen. But I have a Facebook page, which is also Dana Claire. So hopefully you guys can find me there. Love to see you.
And where can we find you, Jordan?
Thank you. My website is jordanhbartlett.com, and my Instagram handle is at jordanhbartlett. I'm like you, Dana. I wish I knew how to tweet, but I am a twit and I cannot. But I'm very active on Instagram, and all of my other social medias are on my website. All of our books, apart from the Blood-Light Trilogy and the Reclaimed Kingdom, but Hunterland will be on the CamCat website. All of the books that we talked about today otherwise will be on the CamCat website. And I think we're able to pre-order The Man or the Monster now.
Yes, that should be on the CamCat website.
Perfect. And Curse Undone?
Yep.
Beautiful. And is Hunterland up for pre-order yet?
Not yet.
But soon. So watch this space.
Very soon.
It has been such a treat chatting with you, ladies. Thank you so much for your time and for your wonderful answers.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Any last remarks?
My Instagram is all book stuff and lots of pictures of my pets. So,
and you just casually have one right here. What's this one?
Yeah, this is Puck.
Oh, hello, Puck.
He's a little baby parakeet.
Love him.
He's
a 4 months old this week.
Oh,
he likes giving kisses.
Perfect. Well, thank you all so much. This has been a treat, and happy Friday.
Thanks.
Happy Friday.
Have a great weekend.